Hi, it's Doc and Skip from the Morning Blaze with Doc and Skip.
A little redundant there.
Every weekday morning, we bring you the collision of common sense and comedy.
Okay, now what does that even mean?
It means we discuss current topical stories that matter to people in an entertaining way.
Well, I mean, you and I find them entertaining.
Anyway, follow us on Twitter and tell us what you learned throughout the program with the hashtag #WhatILearnedToday.
That's really just an excuse for us to slack off the last segment, as it's written by you, the listener.
Hear the show on demand anytime at theblaze.com/doc.
That's theblaze.com/Doc and Skip.
Oh, so now you want to be a part of this? Now you.
And now, it's time to Stand for Truth with the host of Stand for Truth Radio, Susan Knowles.
And welcome to the program, everyone. I'm your host, Susan Knowles. Please check out my website at susanknowles.com and the articles that I write as a contributor to The Blaze. I have an article out there today under the contributors section I think you might find interesting. It's entitled, Obama is Bullying His Way Through His Presidency. So go there, if you will, take a read, and then share it with everyone. And don't forget to follow us on Stand for Truth Radio on Spreaker.com and a segment I do called Knowles on the News. As I said, just go to Spreaker.com or download the Spreaker phone app and take us with you 24/7. You'll be able to find it by just typing in Stand for Truth Radio. You can also find me on my YouTube channel under Susan Knowles and at Susan Knowles on Twitter. Now, we have all seen the rioting and looting in places like Ferguson, Baltimore, talked about Black Lives Matter protests, and have seen our president not call for these occurrences to stop. It's as though a problem doesn't even exist in his mind, and the news doesn't seem to address the problem either. Today, my guest is Colin Flaherty, and he's going to discuss his thoughts about what's going on when it comes to violence within the black community and why no one is recognizing it. So let me go ahead and introduce him, and let's get this program started. Colin Flaherty is the author of the best-selling books White Girl Bleed a Lot and Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. Both books document thousands of recent examples of black mob violence and black-on-white crime, and how the media and public officials ignore, deny, condone, excuse, encourage, and even lie about it. Flaherty has won more than 40 journalism awards from the San Diego Press Club and the Society of Professional Journalists, including several awards for an investigative story about a black man who was convicted of trying to kill his white girlfriend. It's the case of Kelvin Wiley, and I'm going to be asking Colin in a minute to give us some more details about that case. In December 2015, WND named Flaherty to its list of top 10 culture warriors. And he's had prominent figures like Sean Hannity, Colonel Allen West, and others approve of his books and the information that he's bringing forth to make the public more aware of what's happening on this subject. So let's welcome to the show, Colin Flaherty. Welcome.
Hey, great to be here, Susan.
Now, I mentioned that you have a connection to a man in San Diego called, his name is Kelvin Wiley. Can you briefly tell us about the case and the part that you played in it?
Well, when I was living in San Diego and a reporter in San Diego, I was talking to my editor, and I literally fished a letter out of my editor's trash can that said,
wow.
Hey, I'm in prison. I didn't do it. Please write a story on this. I thought, I'm going to write a story about how this guy is still lying to people while he's in prison. So I started looking at the story, and the guy said, yeah, even at sentencing, the judge said the main witness against me was lying. Well, the story is a black man who's convicted of trying to kill his white girlfriend. I said, that can't be true. Sure enough, I looked at it. There's the judge saying, yeah, I think the witness was lying about the circumstances of the case. But they still found him guilty. They still sent him to prison. So I documented how the woman had tried to do the same thing to a guy before. I documented what really happened that morning, got him out of prison. It was on NPR, the LA Times. It was a big deal. I was a big hero then. Now that I'm documenting white hostility, resentment, and crime, I'm less of a hero to that crowd now.
Wow. That's really interesting. It goes to show you that they a lot of times can get it wrong in the court system, and that sounds like a really big error on the part of the judge there. So glad that you picked that up.
To get somebody out of prison, when somebody gets sent to prison, that's not just the judge and jury. There's 40 people involved in the process, right? There's cops,
right.
There's probation people, there's this and that. So really, when you go into your publisher and you say, okay, here's the story. Oh, by the way, if we're wrong, you basically will lose your magazine or newspaper in a lawsuit. No, there's not that many innocent people in prison, but so I was able to get one of them out.
That's great. Now, you, in talking about this subject matter, how did you get interested in the subject of black mob violence and black on white crime?
Well, I was doing a radio show with my brother in Wilmington, Delaware, at WDEL, and I saw a story come across. It said 13 black people were taken to the emergency. 13 Asians were taken to the emergency room. They were high school students at South Philadelphia High. They were taken to the emergency room because they were all assaulted one day. And I kept reading the stories, and it was like I knew South Philadelphia High School. That's a black high school with just a few Asian students. But none of the stories thought it was significant that over a long period of time, large groups of black people were harassing, torturing, beating, assaulting, robbing Asian students. And so I kept asking around. I said, what's up with that? It looks like a bunch of black people are just that's racial to me. They all said, no, Colin, the reporters told me this. I said, no, race didn't have anything to do with that. And then I started talking about it, writing about it a little bit. Then I started seeing this all over the country, how there's this enormous level of black on white, black on Asian, black on gay crime and violence, and that's half of the stuff I write about. The other half is how reporters and public officials ignore, deny, condone, excuse, encourage, and even lie about it. So it all started with that one school in Philly, and how reporters and public officials were absolutely lying about what was going on. We had the principal in the school, South Philly High. She gave out a flyer to the Asian students telling them how to behave so they wouldn't antagonize the black students at the school. That's how crazy it was.
Well, and that I have to say, that's exactly the same thing that is happening in Germany. They're handing out flyers on for the women, how not to get raped by the migrants that have come over there, like from Syria, the refugees. It's the same thing. It's crazy, absolutely nuts.
When you think about how reporters report the black crime and violence and how they report anything connected with Islam, it's kind of like molecule for molecule the same. The denial, deceit, delusion, it's astonishing.
It is. And you have a YouTube channel. It's just under Colin Flaherty, right? Is that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I wanted to tell everybody about that and make sure that they go there and look at the films that you have. How does the public react to your videos in general?
See, my style in my videos is the same as in my books, which is, hey, I'm not doing causes and solutions or big grand theories. I'm just presenting something like, hey, this happened over and over and over and over and over. And when people see these videos from security cameras, from the people themselves, of people dying, of people in the knockout games, people being assaulted, of large groups of black people rampaging through an area, and we see the cops going, well, we're not going to arrest anybody, they are astonished. Everybody's astonished that there's so much going on, that they're astonished that the local media and public officials are so eager not to talk about it, and they're astonished that nobody's connecting the dots. So that's what I'm doing. I'm showing how this is happening all over the country. Lots of people dying, lots of people getting hurt because the local press and local public officials aren't being forthcoming about what's really going on.
Well, but what you're saying is that you're just reporting the facts and the truth. And as we all know today, that's really on the way the progressives look at that. They don't want to hear that, because even if it is factual and is truth, they don't want you reporting on it. So
well, you know what, you read. I know that you read at least one of my books. I mean, am I misrepresenting how the information is presented in the books? It's like, hey, here's what's going on.
Right. I mean, you're not sitting there saying, oh, I have this vendetta, so I'm going to go after one group or the other. You're just saying, here is something that I've noticed. I'm presenting it to you, and then you can make your own conclusion. I did read your book. It was Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. And you gave example after example. You told exactly where it happened. I mean, it's just there. It's factual. So, but like I said, some people don't like the truth. It's hard on them.
So half of the book, of course, is for the criminals. But the other half, the crazy half, which is woven together, is for the reporters and public officials who just won't tell us what's going on. Those are the people who put people in danger by giving them a false sense of safety where they do not deserve to have one. Lots and lots of examples of that.
Right. Now, you also talk about, in my opinion, Obama seems to currently be trying to, right some type of a wrong that he sees is a wrong that he needs to right. And he's always talking about how there are disproportionate amount of black people in the prisons as compared to whites. And he's very happy about the fact that he's recently reduced that population in the prisons. I mean, the rest of us, whether they're black, white, Asian, Hispanic, or whatever, when you're talking about releasing criminals, not too many people are happy about that. But, what are your thoughts about what I just said about Obama and him wanting to right a wrong and talking about the disproportionate amount of blacks in the prison over everybody else?
Well, a couple of things. One, in Obama's own words, he has been the victim of racism his entire life. In his book, he talks about how when he was playing on his high school basketball team, his coach he wasn't a starter, parentheses, he was entitled to be a starter. He wasn't a starter because of the way he played. He played black. That's what Obama said. So that's why he was denied his rightful place in the athletic firmament in Hawaii. One thing I've seen that I don't think a lot of people are aware of is how race conscious everybody that works for Obama is. Top to bottom, they're looking at everything through the lens of race. Right. So when they see a criminal, when they see a whole bunch of black people in prison, way out of proportion, they're not looking at criminals. They're looking at victims of white racism. That's who the criminals are. And is black people and white people commit the same amount of crimes. The only reason black people are caught is because we put more police in black neighborhoods. They actually believe this. They're not shy about saying this. This attitude goes from top to bottom in the federal government, EPA, Department of Labor, you name it. Very, very race conscious.
Well, and I hate to break this to Obama, but I've seen him kind of do things that athletes, he's always talking about. I think he sees himself as an athlete. I really do. And we've all kind of seen him do different things. I don't think that he necessarily has the abilities of an athlete, and maybe he should just go back and reexamine that. But you're right. He wouldn't do that because he looks at everything as a racial issue, everything. And it just isn't that way. But he's focused on that. And he continues to think that way on just about every subject.
Well, here's what he's right. Here's what he's right on. Mm-hmm. And I document this a lot and Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. Black people are much more race conscious than white people, and it's kind of an article of faith among a whole lot of black people that they are victims of white racism. They're very unhappy about that, and that's very that's very easy to find.
Well, and I know that, at least in my opinion, it seems that Obama would like for Americans to believe that black crime is just the result of drugs, and which is caused by poverty, and that a lot of, being the white people are at the root of the problems of black people. Now, I've had Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson on, and I know that you probably have heard of him and perhaps know him. And if the listeners out there, if you haven't heard Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson, I have him on Spreaker.com. You really want to go back and hear that show because he doesn't hold back. He talks about what he thinks is the real reason that all of this black crime, whether it be black on white or just black crime in general, but he has an ability to be able to talk about that more because he is a black man himself, and so I think it's more accepted by people when you hear him talk about it than when you hear white people talk about the subject. But what is your opinion about why you think that the cause of the black violence? What's the reason behind it for you, in your opinion?
Well, here's the thing. If you want to learn what the cause of black violence is, turn on any cable channel, and it's like 24/7. But here's my observation of what everybody's saying. Up till about a year ago or 2 years ago, everybody was reading off a laundry list of family, poverty, education, fatherlessness, motherlessness, whatever. Those are the reasons for this enormous disparity between black people and white people on crime and educate, all this other stuff. But about a year or so ago, everybody kind of turned on a dime. They took all that off the table. Today, the main reason that we hear for this enormous disparity between black people and white people is one reason only. That is white racism. And it's the feeling that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. That is, you know, I know it sounds kind of silly to say that, but what if that is true? What if that is the position of the president and all the people he appointed in the federal government? I'm here to tell you that is true, and that's what I documented, and don't make the black kids angry.
Well, and it's true. I mean, you hear that a lot, and we also hear that, you know, that white people just need to sit down and talk to the black violent mobs, and then things will get worked out. And that's really hard to do when there's so much anger and aggression and frustration coming back to you. And we're, as white people, are supposed to feel guilty about everything. And it's so ridiculous. Nothing is ever going to come out of that. You know, you can't talk to people when you're in fear or you're being hurt or something else. And so I think that's, the president kind of gives everybody this you know, open, go ahead and do this type thing. I mean, the way he talks, he doesn't stop it. He doesn't come out and say, stop the violence. He doesn't tell everybody, you know, stand down on that. He just allows it to occur and really gives everybody the green light to go ahead and do that, because you don't have anybody speaking out and saying, that's wrong, you need to stop, we're going to arrest you, whatever. He doesn't do that.
You know, a couple of years ago, the Attorney General famously said, we are a nation of cowards when it comes to race. But I don't think a lot of people really understood what he meant. A guy wrote a book called Courageous Conversations. He goes around to school districts, teaching hundreds and hundreds around the country. His name is Dr. Glenn Singleton. He teaches young white teachers how to teach black students. And he looks them in the eye and he demands that they have a courageous conversation. And here's how it goes: that you, Susan, we have to be courageous enough to admit our white racism is responsible for all this crazy stuff black people are up to. That's it. That's what Holder was talking about. And that so nobody wants to have a conversation. They want to have a monologue about the evils of white racism and how black people are not responsible for this enormous disparity in crime and violence between black people and white people around the country.
Well, and it's true, and you know, from what I've heard and talking to Jesse, you know, black people are taught that white people are racist, and so, you know, when you're trained and taught to believe that from early childhood, it is something that you're just going to assume is there, whether it is or not.
Look, I've called Jesse Lee Peterson the most important man in America on many occasions, and he is. For that reason, he's the one really speaking out on the enormous hostility that exists, black on white, in this country, and how white people are just not aware of how much they are loathed by a lot of black people. Jesse's good on that. Yeah.
Now, in my mind too, we've seen a lot of increase in black violence since Obama, you know, has been in office, and everybody sees that as, you know, he's purposely trying to divide the races. What's your opinion on why he does that?
You know, again, I don't know the why. I just keep showing how it happens. The why, to me, see, when I sit down to write a book, I decided I was going to write a book without causes or solutions or big theories, because I'm dealing with people who deny that black mob violence and black on white crime and black racial hostility is a problem. They say it doesn't exist. We're all the same and nothing really, there's no difference. So I thought, well, it really doesn't make any sense to write about causes and solutions for a problem that most people say does not exist. That's why in my book, it's all just like one example after another. Boom, boom, boom. Louisville,
right.
Hundreds and hundreds of black people rampaging down the street. Or the first chapter in the book is from Rochester. A couple of years ago, they moved some Asian refugees from Nepal and Burma into Rochester, into the ghetto, the black neighborhood of Rochester. I think they moved 5,000 of them in there. Within a couple of years, every single person there had been the victim of at least one, if not repeated, episodes of violence, harassment, taunting, robbery. And it took the newspaper years to do a story on it. And when it did, it spent half the story kind of apologizing for noticing that all the people involved, all the criminals, were black. So that's what I do, chapter after chapter after chapter, boom, boom, boom. When you're done reading it, I think the impression is, wow, there's something really crazy going on in this country. And we don't, you know what, Susan? We don't need to have an explanation for it. We just have to acknowledge there's something crazy going on. Then we could kind of figure out what else we have to do.
Now, you're familiar, I believe, with the incident that happened in New York the other day. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there was a rape. There was a rape in New York. 5 black people go into a small Hispanic grocery store. They point a gun at the father, say, "Get out of here." They take the girl across the street, rape her. So I did a story. I did a video on this. This just came out this morning, where I said, listen, this isn't the only example of black mob sexual violence. And recently, there's a story up in Rochester. I think I documented like 7 or 8 of them, and within the last month, of large groups of black people getting sexual violence on somebody who's not black. So we're connecting the dots around the country. When you talk about rape, black on white rape, that topic makes people's heads explode. But here's what we know for sure. I mean, there's some atomic bombs in this thing. Like, I was reading an article in a black magazine the other day. It said 60% of black women are raped before they turn 18. Oh. Then it said 95 out of 100 of these cases are not reported. Here's more atomic bomb number. I mean, the number of black on white rapes in this country every year is 10 to 20,000. It's huge. The number of white on black rapes is so small it often can't even be detected. So there's something really crazy going on. That's what this story. See, all these stories to me, by themselves, they're insignificant. But when you link them to a larger thing, that's when you say, listen, here's an example of something really bad going on in this country right now. And that Brooklyn rape is really a good example of that.
Now, you also talk about in your book about the Williamsburg effect. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
The Williamsburg effect. Are we talking about depolicing? Are we talking about cops not? Tell me what the Williams. I'm getting so senile. I should know what's in my own book. Next time, I guess I should, memorize. But tell me what it is.
I do that too. In my book, if somebody asks me about it, I have to really think about the point for a minute, because you write it, you get everything out there, and you just kind of leave it and go away. No, the Williamsburg effect is when too many whites move into a black neighborhood.
Sorry. I'm all over that. Yeah. I talk about that I talked about that this morning in a video I'm just making right now. Like, Williamsburg is, of course, Brooklyn, and it's a Jewish section of Brooklyn, but there's lots of sections where white people move into these gentrified areas, and they kind of think that, because they're a nice person and they have nothing but love in their heart for all of God's creatures, that they're going to be received with open arms. When they move into a black neighborhood, they find out very quickly they are met with hostility, harassment, violence. Whether it's Williamsburg or the neighborhood around Temple, Philadelphia. I just did a story a couple of days ago for American Thinker. It was about the director in Baltimore. I don't know if you remember hearing this. She came out. She was asked by the BBC. The BBC said, "Look, everybody knows that African Americans in America, or especially Baltimore, are being targeted for murder by the state. What do you think about that?" She said, "Yeah, well, I'm okay with the riots and violence because racist white people don't listen to black people. So that's the way to get them to listen. So my story said, listen, we've had musicians who are connected to the symphony die from black violence after they leave their practice. And I mentioned one guy's name. Well, his guy's friends started writing me letters. The guy who died, his name is Peter Maverick. They told me his story about he was a white guy with a family, a researcher at Johns Hopkins. He moved into a black neighborhood. He was the only white guy in the neighborhood. And lots of people are like, this happens. I document this all the time. They think they're full of love for all of God's creatures. This guy, shortly after moving in, was ambushed and killed on his porch, 6 gunshots to the head. And there's a lot of poster children for white people who think they can move into a black neighborhood without danger. There's even a name for it. It's called routine activity theory, i.e., RAT, i.e., that means a white person in a black neighborhood routinely subject to intense levels of violence and even death.
Well, and I've had some personal experience with that, and I've talked about it on this show before. When I was a child, my parents were visiting my aunt in Washington, D.C., and we all had dinner, and then we decided to walk home. And in D.C., everything is so far away. I mean, it really is.
Now, what part of D.C. were you in, if you don't mind me asking?
We were in, like, what I was at the time, anyway, was like called the ghetto. We didn't know that. We had no idea. We were told later, you were in the ghetto section, and I have no idea exactly where that's at because it was so long ago. But as we walked through there, we had firecrackers thrown at us. People yelled at us. I mean, I think we really just made it through because people thought we were crazy. Like, why would you come here and walk through this neighborhood like that? But, I mean, it's scary because for us, we didn't think about anything like that.
Well, here's the thing. So you visit some people, and what I really kind of resent is the people you visited. They didn't grab you by the lapels and say, Susan, you can't walk there.
I know.
Are you an idiot? You're going to get hurt. But
yeah.
I had this experience. I was going to the air. We just picked up, my friends and I, they had an Irish student staying with them. So we picked them up at the airport, and sometimes to go from point A to point B, the only way to get there is go through the ghetto. So we were going through the ghetto of Wilmington, Delaware, and we were at the heart of it. And I said, listen, if by chance car ever breaks down or you ever drive through here, first of all, don't. But if you do, don't get out of the car. I mean, don't stop. This is a very dangerous place. The person who was hosting the Irish kid kind of cut me off and changed the subject. I asked her about it later on. She said she didn't want to give him the wrong impression of the town. And people like that put other people in danger. Yeah.
Well, and it happens. It even happened in San Diego at a time in Southeast San Diego, and that area as well. And I was working for the Humane Society at the time, and this another officer and myself, a male officer, we had to go down to that area because of reports of animal abuse, and both of us, are white. And when we parked the truck, immediately, I mean, it was amazing. But people came and started sitting on our trucks, like don't get out of the car. I mean, it was a sign to us, and they wanted us to know you're not welcome here. So, it seems to happen in different areas for different reasons, and it doesn't seem to be in just this city it's going to happen. And, I'm sure you see that with all your videos. It's not in any particular part of the country. It's kind of throughout the country in different areas.
Well, San Diego, if you live in San Diego, that Southeast, of course, where I lived in San Diego for a long time. Southeast is the black section of San Diego, and everybody knows that's what it is. So there's not really that much racial hostility day to day in San Diego unless you go down to that part of town. All the rest of the time, people walk around going, "Hey, everybody, love and peace." Yeah. There's a lot of black, black on white hostility and violence is now mainstream. You could see it talked about in Atlantic. You see it talked about in the bestsellers, and everybody's just kind of like acknowledge that black on white hostility is completely understandable, as are anything that results from it, especially black on white violence, because you know what? White people do it too. That's the greatest lie of our generation, Susan.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the black on white crime is increasing, and nobody wants to look at that. And they don't. I mean, for a while it seems like we didn't have much of that at all, and then within the last 7 years, we have a huge jump in that.
There's a lot of when you start talking about crime rates, there's a lot of people that like to throw around a lot of fishy information. Talk about that and don't make the black kids angry. How you cook the books, why the black crime rate, as bad as it is actually way, way worse. You got stitches for snitches. You got witness intimidation, which district attorneys around the country say is now at epidemic levels. You've got Bronx juries. A Bronx jury, if you Google it, you'll find that a Bronx jury is in a black city where black jurors tend not to convict black defendants. And now we've got, like in Baltimore, New York, and Philly, the mayors and police chiefs are very proud of the fact that they're only arresting half of the people they used to arrest. And so they quit arresting people, and the crime numbers go down, and they go around trumpeting that crime is down, but everybody around town goes, boy, it sure doesn't feel like crime's down around here. I wonder why that is.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, look at the example you're talking about Baltimore. What happened in Baltimore with Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake, how she handled things, how Mosby, the prosecutor, handled things. I mean, what's your opinion of what went on in Baltimore and how that just increased the violence?
Again, like I don't really I try not to traffic in opinions, and I tell people what happened. I mean, when you see a video of cops being surrounded by hundreds of black people, then you hear the 911 calls, part of and you hear the cops panicking, saying, "We are surrounded. They're throwing. I just got hit in the face with a brick. Please help us. Send reinforcements." And they were abandoned. The mayor abandoned the cops in the middle of the riots.
Yeah,
very,
absolutely.
very nasty business. Then we have Carolyn Mosby going out there saying, "I am with you. We will get justice for the rioters." So there's an enormous amount of black on white hostility. Baltimore is a chocolate city where black hostility and resentment is part of the DNA of that town. Lots and lots of white victims of black violence there.
And it's going to be interesting to see, because that Baltimore is one of the places, too, that has agreed to take the refugees in from Syria. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens when you bring those people into Baltimore, and how, I mean, I can't even imagine the clash that's going to happen there. So
you know what? We don't have to imagine it. It already happens. It happened in L.A. They put a bunch of refugees from Africa in the middle of the darkest ghetto of L.A. They were brutalized. We see what happened in Rochester. It happens all over the country, where they put refugees in the. That's where the housing is the cheapest. You get people like Catholic Charities who think, we're all God's children. And how could anybody ever think that the level of criminality in the black neighborhood is higher than anywhere else? That's racist. They put people in there and they have the worst experience of their lives. Very famous book written about this, a really great book. Chinese Girl in the Ghetto. Talks about an 11-year-old girl from China. They moved to America. She moved to Oakland. She describes her life growing up as one unrelenting, unremitting episode of violence, harassment, and taunting and danger after another. I mean,
wow.
I don't know how anybody could. There's nobody that can really dispute this. I'm sorry, but you cannot.
Well, and it also seems to me like the police officers are kind of being used as the scapegoat in all this. Instead of looking at the crime at itself, we're kind of using the cops as this is, again, another reason why that people are reacting the way they are. You gave the example of Baltimore.
Isn't it amazing that Chicago is, in certain places of Chicago, are just as dangerous as anywhere on the planet? And you get a lot of people getting killed in Chicago. And so now we have Hillary Clinton and the mayor of Chicago calling for a federal investigation of crime in Chicago, but they want to investigate the police, not the criminals. Susan, you're smarter than I am. Maybe you could help me make some sense out of that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's all one-sided. We look at we don't ever look at the problem. You know, when it comes to things and solving things, but progressives don't look at the problem itself. They always look at everybody else because it's everybody else's fault but the people who are committing the crimes. So, I mean, this is not anything new to me.
You know, I get a lot of email from cops. I get a lot of email from Chicago cops. And I was talking to one on the phone a few weeks ago, and I heard the scariest word I've ever heard in my life. He used the word depolicing. He said in their meetings that morning, they have, just like the TV shows, they all sit in a room, and the sergeant goes, "Let's be careful out there."
Right.
In that meeting, they're talking about depolicing neighborhoods.
Unbelievable.
I'm at a loss for words. You know, people, I talk lots and lots of cops read my books, and they send me lots of information. And they all say the same thing. Colin, nobody knows how bad it is out there. Nobody knows how dangerous it is. Nobody knows the relentless violence and harassment that cops go through. I have a whole section on my YouTube channel and in my books on how black people are harassing and attacking cops relentlessly. I don't think people are aware of that. And you know what? If you have a relative, by the way, Susan, who's contemplating being a cop, they should be aware of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be a cop today if you paid me. I went through the police academy years ago and decided not.
You were thinking about it?
I was thinking about it, absolutely. In San Diego. Yeah. And there's no way that I would do that today. You couldn't pay me enough to be a cop today because basically their hands are tied. They really are. And I know that you talked a little bit a while ago about the reporting aspects with cops. And they're not reporting all of the crime. They're looking the other way when before they would have broken things up and arrested people, and they're no longer doing that.
The cops are being instructed don't I can't say it any better than what you just said, other than cops in Chicago, Cincinnati, Baltimore, New York, Houston, all these cities. They write and tell me exactly what you just said. Yeah. I mean, they had a meeting in Chicago last summer. The meeting started with a captain. It was a community meeting, right? It was one of these meetings where a neighborhood, kind of a middle-class white neighborhood, lots and lots of crime. And so they had a meeting. And the captain walks in and goes, "Listen, we're not even going to talk about crime statistics because we all know none of these statistics are any good anymore." And they're cooking the books. And a lot of people know it.
And it's funny, the DOJ will walk in there anytime that it looks like there are more numbers of blacks in there than they want it to be. So they'll come in there and they'll talk about that. "Oh, let's investigate and see what's going on here. There's got to be a problem. You're arresting too many black people." But when there's underreporting, nobody comes in and looks at that. It's like you said, they're cooking the book. Nobody cares.
I documented how in New Orleans, what you do is say the way you cook the books is if you're arrested for stealing a car, all of a sudden that goes from being a felony, they can change it to a misdemeanor. They were doing this so much in New Orleans, the state of Louisiana had to go in there and go, "Hey, you're cooking the books, and we're not going to let you do that." This is happening. I documented it in Milwaukee, Chicago, Baltimore, New York. There was a front page story in the New York Times that says basically, unless you have a video and the crook tied up inside of your house, it's very difficult to get a cop to take a police report. And so there's a lot of that going on.
Now, you also talked about how the mainstream media handles these type of things. Talk to us a little bit about what they do and how they report this crime.
Well, if you want to get a really, really good snapshot of what's happening around the country with black mob violence and black on white crime, you use Google News Alerts. Google has a little thing. You put a term in there, and every time that term pops up on Google, they'll send you an email. So if you put in the term unruly teenagers or teens fighting or large fight or something like that, you're going to see all this stuff happening all over the country that nobody's really talking about. You talked about that fight. Okay, you talked about the 5 black people who raped that girl just the other day.
Right.
I did a story same day. Except it was in the evening. Hundreds and hundreds of black people were on the streets of the Bronx fighting, destroying property. Hundreds. They shot a cop. And, that was like no big deal. There's a lot of that large scale violence going on, and the reporters, they just all think it's normal, so they don't really talk about it. They have all these euphemisms. The other day in Texas, right? A lot of people by now have heard that a white college co-ed in North Texas was at a traffic light after a New Year's Eve party. A bunch of black people pulled up. They shot her in the head and killed her. Wow. And to me, this was a clear case of black on white crime. The Associated Press said it was a case of road rage. So, people they're just not dealing with the seriousness of what's happening here.
Well, it's the same thing they do with anything with ISIS. It's always workplace violence. It's never what it really is. We always have something, again, somebody else to blame. It's your fault, not their fault. On and on and on.
Well, here's the thing. That's why, that's why it's important you're doing your show. That's why it's important you do stuff for the Blaze. We don't have to worry anymore about well, we kind of have to, but we can do our own thing now. We are the media, as Breitbart said. So let's just be our own media. Let's do our own stories. Let's post them. That's what's happening. I get so much of that on my YouTube channel. Everybody's really kind of everybody's clued in, like, oh yeah, we have to spread the word now. We're not going to wait around for anybody else to do it.
Well, we have to spread the word because the media will not do it. I mean, absolutely will not do it. We've seen that for the past 7 years. They're not going to do it. And if they do talk about anything, whether it's black on white violence or whatever the case may be, if it doesn't fit their agenda, they're going to they're going to underreport. They're not going to say how many people were actually there or who they were or what race they were or anything else. You're going to get what they want you to be fed. And we have to get out there, and your YouTube channels is a perfect way to get the message out.
It's very powerful. And now, the media has kind of taken it to another level, whereas before they would kind of ignore it, and deny it. But now they're into kind of actively saying things that aren't true. They're talking about how black people are victims of white violence and white racism all the time. They kind of forget to give examples of it. But so now they're going 180 degrees away from the truth. And a lot of people are getting hurt because of this. And there's there's tons of examples of this.
Well, and then with the Black Lives Matter, what's your opinion on what's going on there? What have you seen with the protests with Black Lives Matter?
Well, I've seen what everybody else has seen, which is the Black Lives Matter people, their main message has been picked up by every newspaper in the story, which is black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything, especially why cops are always picking on black people for no reason whatsoever. So it's very difficult for these reporters. They just cannot look at these Black Lives Matter people and say, can you give me an example? You're just making this up. And this is, this whole theme of the Black Lives Matter, this whole theme of black victimization, this is the greatest lie of our generation. That's why I do the videos. That's why I wrote Don't Make the Black Kids Angry, because the only way I know how to fight a lie is with the truth.
Right. Well, and you see these same people holding everybody else hostage. I mean, you really do. I don't know how I don't want to call it terrorism, but it is. It may not be terrorism as like with ISIS, but it is terrorism in the sort that it's done to scare people, to terrorize them, to make them afraid to go in a restaurant and eat. I mean, people have gone in there and have started yelling at people, like a whole mob of people who want to make their point. They've gone to the streets and blocked off the street. How is that not terrorism?
You have a whole group of Black Lives Matter protesters in New York on video last year. They remember that? They were marching, chanting, "What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want it? Now." They kept saying that. And harassment and threats of violence are now directed at cops, are now an everyday fact of life in America. I don't think people really know what that means yet.
Talk a little bit about your other book, White Girl Bleed a Lot. Tell us about that and how you came to get that title.
Well, the title comes from Milwaukee. Now, before writing this, I didn't really realize that Milwaukee is a center of black mob violence, black on white crime, and denial from the newspaper and public officials. But it is, and I documented it. So that story comes from the 4th of July. A bunch of black people go into a convenience store, and on video, they loot it. Okay? Candy, groceries, and during these episodes, and there's lots of them, there's always laughing. They take their grocery and candies a couple blocks away to a park, 4th of July picnic with a couple kids. They beat the hell out of these kids really badly. At one point, a black woman is standing over a white woman. She points down to the white person on the ground, motions to all of her friends to look, and says, "White girl bleed a lot." They all thought that was extremely funny. By the way, the punchline of this is the next day they went to the police station and they said, "Hey, did you guys ever catch those like 50 to 100 black people that beat the hell out of us in the park last night?" Cop looks at the guy at the front desk, goes, "What are you talking about? We don't have a police report on that."
Oh, my gosh. Unbelievable. You talked about in your book, and I don't know if you remember this, but there was an incident at USC, and there was a large party going on. Do you remember that part in your book?
Of course. Yeah, that I remember.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, this is like one out of a million of these things.
I know.
Late night party. Cops show up at the door. A cop show. L.A. cops. I'm telling you, I don't care what anybody says. Those guys are polite. They kind of walk up the door. "Excuse me, maybe you guys didn't notice. It's a little bit late out. Do you think you could turn your music down a little bit? Maybe it's time to think about breaking the party up." All of a sudden, they're met with like a wall of obscenity and violence. People started throwing things at this cop. Well, one guy was trying to shut the party down. Next thing you know, he calls up and says, "Hey, "Oh yeah, we got a riot here." Next thing you know, there's like 70 cops there, and they break the party up. The punchline is, in the aftermath of that, everybody at the party was talking about how they were victims of this police brutality because the police responded when these guys started throwing rocks and attacking the cops. And they had a big meeting at USC about it. Everybody stood up and said the same thing. Black people are victims of this violence. There's an enormous amount of black on white crime in and around college campuses, and it's easy to find. SC is probably one of the most dangerous areas in America to put a college campus. You put it right in that part of LA. It's a black neighborhood.
Right.
Everybody that goes to USC knows, you walk off that campus, one block off, you are in Indian country, and people that don't believe this have died regretting it.
Well, and it's amazing too, and I could see it happening where at USC they had this big meeting, like you said, and then it turns out that, well, everybody else is just a racist, and you wouldn't have done that to white people. I mean, I don't know how we get people to look at things actually and factually and leave race and the emotion out of it. And I know probably talking to somebody, a black person, they would say, well, you can't leave it out. It is always there, like we talked before. That's how kind of like they're taught that whites are all racist. But how do we stop this? And I know that isn't something that you normally look at, but I try to look for solutions to things. How to bring people together, not getting them further and further apart. I can't see how our country brings people together when you have someone, I'm going to use it again, like Obama and the DOJ, that keeps stirring things up.
Down in Baltimore, a woman named Tracy Halverson wrote a story called "Baltimore, You're Breaking My Heart." She's a white kind of urban pioneer, gentrifier. She wrote a story about how, she thought she was living in a safe neighborhood. Then after she moved in, she realized she had to borrow her neighbor's pit bull if she wanted to walk around the block. So she wrote a story exactly like you just said. It's like, oh no, there's nothing to do with black and white. It's all just criminals. And come on, people, let's all get together, smile on your brother, everybody. Let's get together and love one another right now.
Right.
So she writes that story. It went viral, and all these people in Baltimore said, "Tracy, you've got it wrong. It is about race. It's about your white racism that gives you the expectation of safety in Baltimore when black people do not have that." So I cannot overstate the amount that the race is a central organizing feature for many, many black people in this country. And part and parcel of that is this hostility and antipathy towards white people. Lots and lots of that in the book.
Well, and as I've mentioned on this program before, growing up in the South, I was faced with a lot of that every single day in school. And we had times where we had riots going on, race riots. People were beaten up. Chairs were thrown across the room. You never knew if you were at lunch what was going to happen. Girls' hair was set on fire.
Did you go to a school where there was busing?
Yes. Yeah.
Is that so? The races, so they bust in black kids, or they bust you into a black school?
Mostly, it was. I'll take that back. In one school, you had that I was in, we had the blacks that were bussed in, and then the other school, we were kind of in their neighborhood, so to speak. But it really wasn't, a typically like a black neighborhood labeled as that. It was what they called the city schools. So it was kind of like downtownish.
Okay, so how many white kids in these schools were the object of black hostility and violence? What percent?
Well, pretty much 100% in my grade.
So do the math. Do the math here, okay? How many schools like that exist across the country? And so then you have a number. You have a school, what percent? Then you have another number. Then you say, how long did it go on? Then you have another number. Guess what? That number of white victims of black violence in schools during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it gets up to the millions very, very quickly. Because guess what? I get so many letters from people that went through the same thing you went through all over the country.
Well, and it's so sad. And again, I think that the difference was, as the white kid going to a school like that and the other white kids that I knew, we really didn't know why they were so angry at us. So every day we're like, what did we do? We kept trying to find a reason for it. What did we do? And it was kind of like, later you learn that it's not what you did, it's just the way it is. And you had to kind of live in that environment and just learn how to survive. That's what we did as kids.
Susan, how many kids who were the victims of this relentless hostility and violence, how many told their parents?
All of them. Yeah,
a lot
pretty
of kids
much all.
Don't. And so what did the parents do when they heard about this?
And it's really weird because it was the South, and usually parents will rise up. They don't stay quiet. But it was during a time where the kids were expected to handle things. It was, if you're being bullied, stand up, and that's what we had to do. We didn't have our parents.
You and I understand what that means, but the parents didn't understand what was going on in these schools. I'm convinced of that.
No, I don't think so. Not really. They didn't know it was that bad.
Okay, Colin, somebody pushed you down. Mommy, he pushed me down. Colin, get out there and go kick his butt. Okay?
Yeah.
But what if it happens every day and there's whole groups of people doing it? That's a whole different thing. The parents didn't figure that out, or they didn't want to. So many people got hurt. In my next book, it's going to be about white victims of black violence, personal testimonies, lots and lots of these stories from school. The kids I grew up with, I went to little Catholic schools for 12 years, right? All my buddies went to the local public school. Out of the 20 kids I grew up with, and of those 15 that went to that public school, not one of them graduated from high school. They were driven out of the high school in the early 70s by this relentless level of violence directed at white people going to school, going from school, in school. I saw one of them the other day. These kids, all of them, led the same kind of life. They led a life in the shadows, petty crime, drug addiction. They're all trying to get their lives together now. I said, Ralph, was it as bad as I remember? And I said what I just told you. He goes, oh, no, Colin. It was a hell of a lot worse than that.
Yeah.
So much violence and so many people pretending it didn't exist. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the lesson of South Africa now is for America is this. The world has turned its back on this enormous level of racial violence in South Africa because the world believes white people in South Africa deserve whatever they're getting. We're starting to see the same attitude here. Whatever happens to a white kid in school or on the streets is justified because of 400 years of slavery or because white people do it too. It's a huge lie.
Well, and it is so weird that there was a time, and I remember it, when you didn't hear a lot of this. I mean, and it really has just come back with a vengeance in the last 7 years. And, it's such a shame.
Kids are learning it. Kids learn this in school now, correct? I mean, if you look at the textbooks, kids are learning all about slavery. They learn all about Emmett Till. They learn all about how white people are racist to black people. This is grade school stuff, not college where it's a religion. This is grade school.
Well, that's why
I did a podcast in a story a couple of weeks ago where a guy says, "Listen, the most dangerous month of the most dangerous time of the year for me and my friends in a majority black school was February, Black History Month."
Absolutely. I can attest to that, because we always saw in school that was an increased time of violence for what happened to us during that month. And it was kind of like, here we are, we're thinking, we're learning about what you want us to learn about, and we have a whole month devoted to it, and you're just treating us poorly. That's not going to get your message across. But it's really a shame that we spend so much time, and that race has to be such an issue, because
now here's the thing. Can I cut you off for 1 second?
Yeah.
I hear this a lot. When people are talking about their personal experience with violence, black on white crime and violence, a lot of times they like to deflect and go big picture. I think what you were saying about your personal experience in these schools is enormously important, and I think it marked you. It marked your friends. Are you still in touch with any of the kids you went to school with?
One or two, because it's on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast, so I've lost touch with a lot of people. Is this something you guys ever talk about, or does everybody just kind of shrug their shoulders and say that's just going to happen to us, or what's their attitude towards it? No, pretty much you recall, you just go right back there when you hear this and you see videos. You pretty much go right back to and relive it all. Now the thing in schools is, and I'm documenting this on video all the time, kids, the schools, the black schools, black students are so violent towards black students, white students, Asian, gay students. Now the violence is being directed at teachers, white teachers, black teachers. They're getting hurt all over the country. Today, in Baltimore, 4 teachers will be assaulted today. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. Yeah, we've seen the videos. Sorry, last. Let me give you one more happy fact. Remember Ferguson? In St. Louis? 40 to 50% of the young white liberal female teachers quit on day one of their teaching jobs in a black school because they get in there and they say, "Oh my God, this is crazy. All this violence directed at us. I'm not going to do this." Yeah. A lot of that going on, Susan. Unbelievable. And see, they had a choice, and as kids going to a school, we didn't have a choice, and a lot of kids don't have a choice to change schools and go someplace else. A lot of those teachers they're kind of locked into an agreement. They have to teach in the ghetto, and they get their student loans forgiven. Right, and they lose that opportunity, like everyone else, to have their loans forgiven. But yeah, absolutely. But I wanted to just say, I'm so glad that Colin Flaherty, that you came on today. We have run out of time. This always happens. An hour. No, I thought we were just getting started. I know. It's amazing. We're going to have you back, talk about your other books that you're going to do. But you are the author of White Girl Bleed a Lot and Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. Your YouTube is at Colin Flaherty. Everyone will go there and take a look at that and spread the word and what's going on, and let's get there for other people to see. You know what I would love to do, and I would just be a fly on the wall in this conversation. I would love to have you and some of your friends you went to that school with talk about what happened, just all the facts, no big causes or solutions or anything. Say what happened. Man, I would love to hear that. I would love to do it. Just call me. We'll absolutely do that. I have no problem doing that. People really need to hear the truth, as you said. So we're going to liberate a lot of people with this truth, Susan. So absolutely. I congratulate you. Yeah, well, they need to know. And again, I appreciate what you've done and what you continue to do. And thanks again for coming on the show. And we will talk really soon. Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Well, there you have it. Sometimes people don't like the truth. It's just the way it is. But the truth has to be told. We need to get this information out. I do hope you read his books. I hope you go to his YouTube videos and look at them. This is just something, our president won't talk about and no one else will talk about. And, the way you deal with the bully is you have to stand up, and by standing up, you have to speak out. So until next time, God bless. Take care of yourself. Have a great week. Join us again next week with another great guest. I'll see you then.